This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and Connie Chung.
Good evening. Boris Yeltsin has put down the latest and most serious challenge to his presidency.
On Yeltsin's orders, army commandos stormed the parliament building and took it back from the hardline former communist who had tried to oust Yeltsin. Early Tuesday morning in Moscow now, and Yeltsin is firmly in control of Moscow, and his chief opponents are behind bars. Our coverage of this still developing story begins with CBS News Moscow correspondent Cindy Kennard.
It was, to many here, a great tragedy for Russia. This day when Boris Yeltsin ordered a military attack on his country's parliament building. Russians killing Russians in the worst violence in this city since the Russian Revolution. Fierce fighting in a conflict that both sides claim was a struggle for democracy. During a 10-hour assault, a large section of Moscow became an urban battlefield. All day long, Russian T-72 tanks pounded the parliament's White House headquarters as armored personnel carriers brought special troops to storm the building. Thousands of onlookers ringed the parliament building, watching the fighting in disbelief. Today, it was Boris Yeltsin striking back against parliamentary opponents whose followers had rioted all day Sunday through the streets of Moscow. The worst fighting then at the country's main television center, where government forces nearly lost control. Moscow medical officials report 62 people were killed and 400 wounded during that battle. Today, Boris Yeltsin went on Russian television saying he had ordered a military assault on the parliament's White House, the same building he defended in the name of democracy 2 years ago. As he addressed the nation, his army tanks were firing cannons at offices housing his chief rival, Alexander Rutskoy, and parliamentary chairman Ruslan Hezbollatov. Rutskoy, who said he would fight to the death, was forced to surrender late this afternoon along with Hezbollatov. Both were taken to a prison. Numbers of others loyal to the parliament also gave up during the siege. Government forces had vowed to take the White House in quiet city streets before dusk, but there are still snipers and machine gun fire keeping them from their goal.
Tonight, a curfew has been imposed in the capital city by Boris Yeltsin, the man who won today's military battle. Still, some of his opponents are vowing to fight back against a president whose road to victory, they say, was paved with Russian blood. Cindy Kennard, CBS News, Moscow.
Yeltsin launched his crackdown in the name of democracy, but tonight he followed it up by banning a range of opposition parties, including the communists and a right-wing Russian nationalist group. As night fell, there were still signs of resistance, including some sniper fire. Senior European correspondent Tom Fenton joins us now live from Moscow. Tom?
Connie, it's the middle of the night here. The curfew's in effect, but that hasn't stopped the sporadic shooting. It would be too simple to call this a struggle between the good guys and the bad guys. It's more complicated than that.
Look at the faces in the crowds that tried to bring down Boris Yeltsin. These are the losers in Russia's march to capitalism. Former soldiers, the new unemployed, the elderly on pensions that are now nearly worthless. Don't you understand, this man yells at a policeman. This country is collapsing. They march under a dozen flags from communist to fascist. They are all flags of protest. For a brief moment, they were in charge of the streets. Take my picture, brother, he says. Take my picture. But they are not quite sure where they are going.
We don't know. Our leaders know, and we have good leaders.
Leaders who are in fact exploiting them. Right-wing former generals who blame Russia's problems on the Jews. Demagogues who want to resurrect the Soviet Union.
I am for the power of the Soviet.
No matter how you look at it, both sides today have lost.
This tragedy, unfortunately, this tragedy is not the uniting the society now, but splitting it once again.
Any hopes for a smooth run-up to the December elections have now been dashed, and there's no guarantee that Russia's discontented voters will give Boris Yeltsin any better parliament than the one he just dissolved. Connie?
Tom Fenton in Moscow. Thank you.
The U.S. State Department says one unidentified American was killed and 5 were wounded in the Moscow fighting. The wounded includes one U.S. Marine guard hit by sniper fire outside the U.S. Embassy. The U.S. Embassy is close to the Russian Parliament building, scene of today's main gun battle, and just across from the Moscow mayor's office that was briefly seized yesterday by the hardliners. The Kremlin, about 1.5 miles away, was never threatened.
The fighting crisscrossed through much of central Moscow the past 2 days, with legions of ordinary Russians looking on, while only a minority of citizens actually took part. Correspondent Barry Peterson takes the pulse of the Russian capital.
While Russia's fate hung in the balance, the show went on tonight at the old Moscow Circus. The only difference, so many empty seats for a show that usually packs them in. All we want, said Sasha Sadakova, is peace and to sleep safely. All day long, this was the show that had a city of 9 million people transfixed. Even kids risked death just to get a better view. For miles around, life stopped as people became sightseers to their own history. It's awful, she says. We don't need this. Some shops closed in fear, others remained defiantly open. Even with this trouble, she says, people must have something to eat. People knew the army would beat the few thousand diehards. They didn't know how much blood would be shed. And as darkness fell on Red Square and Lenin's tomb, Yeltsin's victory didn't bring optimism or hope. Is communism finished?
Not yet.
Tonight, Red Square is guarded by these unarmed civilians, people who say they're willing to defend Yeltsin with nothing more than their lives.
No arms, no weapons.
What happens if they come to shoot?
Let us see.
Tonight, the mood is not victory or defeat so much as sadness. After today, said one man, Russia is still a country divided against itself. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Moscow.
Analysis of what's next in Russia a little later, but straight ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the other international hotspot, Somalia. A bloody ambush on U.S. forces results in heavy casualties and possible American hostages.
Plus, President Clinton trying to focus on a domestic agenda in the midst of international chaos.
We're the nurse that takes care of your mom, and the secretary that takes care of your business. We're the people who meet your deadlines and solve your problems and maybe save your life. We're a new kind of temporary help and healthcare company called Interim. And if you don't think of temporary workers as being as skilled or qualified or caring as permanent employees, then you haven't talked to us. Interim. More than temporary help, temporary heroes.
Mothers have learned from countless doctors and pharmacists to take care of coughs with Robitussin. And they've taken this advice home. Robitussin, recommended by Dr. Mom. Ask your doctor or pharmacist.
When I get gas, I may look like this, but I feel like this, painfully bloated.
Gas-X has the most powerful medicine to fight gas faster than antacids.
So, I feel like me again.
Painful gas needs the power of Gas-X.
A dozen U.S. soldiers are dead, scores wounded, and at least one is a captive tonight in the hellhole that is Somalia. Some congressional leaders are calling again for a U.S. pullout. But tonight, President Clinton is rushing more U.S. troops to Mogadishu. National Security Correspondent David Martin has our report.
CW3, Mike Durant.
An American helicopter pilot taken prisoner in Somalia. Dazed and bloodied, he is questioned by his captors.
Innocent people being killed is not good.
One of 6 U.S. soldiers listed as missing in the heaviest fighting yet in Mogadishu. 12 American soldiers killed, 78 wounded. Some of the dead dragged through the streets by jeering Somalis. A Canadian reporter saw one of the bodies.
You could see quite clearly that his face had been mutilated and that he had a large gash wound along one of his thighs. This crowd followed it down the street and around a corner, pausing every once in a while for people to kick at the corpse, to spit on it, and to stomp on it.
The worst U.S. casualties yet in Somalia, forcing the Pentagon to send reinforcements into what has become an all-out urban war. 200 soldiers complete with tanks and armored personnel carriers, and another 200 Army Rangers to replace those killed, wounded, and exhausted. 2 AC-130 gunships and helicopters to replace those shot down.
These are immediate steps that we feel is necessary to take care of the U.S. forces which are in some risk.
U.S. officials are fed up with the UN operation in Somalia, saying privately the top UN officer there, retired Admiral Jonathan Howe, should be fired for turning what was supposed to be a humanitarian mission into a vendetta against Mohammed Adid, who, despite the bloodshed, remains at large.
I don't think there should be any deadline on the arrest of Adid. The sooner the better. It would be a shortcut, I think, to stability and the recovery of the country.
Politicians of both parties are threatening to cut off funds for the operation.
The end game of U.S. participation in Somalia should be measured in days and weeks, not months and years.
Seems to me that enough Americans have died in Somalia.
Despite all the casualties, Pentagon officials say they succeeded in capturing 19 of Adid's followers, including 2 of his key lieutenants. But if this operation was a success, then the U.S. can't stand much more success in Somalia. Dan?
David Martin live at the Pentagon. Thanks.
President Clinton had tough talk tonight for the Somalis who paraded an American captive as once again foreign policy turmoil stole the limelight from his fall offensive for health care reform. From San Francisco, White House correspondent Rita Braver has more on that.
President Clinton traveled to California to drum up support for his domestic policies. But even before his morning jog by San Francisco Bay, he was briefed on the foreign crises in Russia and Somalia and spent much of the day defending his policies in those countries. At a meeting to plug his job program for California, the president explained why he's sending more troops to Somalia, saying they were needed to help protect Americans already there. And he said the U.S. will demand humane treatment of any captured Americans.
The United States, not the United Nations, the United States will view this matter very gravely and take appropriate action.
And he reiterated his support for Russian President Boris Yeltsin.
If such a thing happened in the United States, you would expect me to take tough action against it as the only person who's been elected by the people of this country. And he did that. As long as he goes forward with a new constitution, genuinely democratic elections for the parliament, genuinely democratic elections for the president, then he is doing what he said he would do. I'm still convinced the United States did the right thing.
The White House says the president is confident that Russian nuclear weapons are secure. Mr. Clinton has still not spoken to Boris Yeltsin, and aides stressed that no one from the U.S. has given Yeltsin any advice about handling the uprising in Russia. Meanwhile, the president said he is doing more work on the problems in Somalia and expects to have announcements about that within the next 48 hours. Rita Braver, CBS News, with the president in San Francisco.
Late word, it appears the U.S. Navy's #1 officer, Admiral Frank Kelso, will be staying on after all. CBS News in Washington confirmed tonight that Defense Secretary Les Aspin, apparently with President Clinton's backing, has overruled Navy Secretary John Dalton's official recommendation that Kelso be fired. At issue, Kelso's leadership during and following the repeated sexual assault and harassment of women at the 1991 Tailhook Convention.
Stay with us for much more CBS Evening News, including the worst news on making ends meet since the early 1960s. Why a new generation is living below the line.
Attention heartburn sufferers.
If antacids work, why do I keep getting heartburn?
You know, frequent heartburn may be a sign of a more serious medical problem. Your doctor has treatment plans that can help.
Frequent heartburn. Isn't it time you talk to your doctor?
Do you wash your dishes before you wash your dishes? Why? The Maytag Jet Clean dishwasher has 43 powerful jets designed to make you somewhat unnecessary. You'll get used to it. Maytag, the dependability people.
Ironic, isn't it? While 70% of our globe is ocean, many people don't have enough water to drink. And until recently, there really was no practical way to turn seawater into abundant, pure drinking water. But now, from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean to communities right here in the United States where fresh water is scarce, Dow Technology is making it possible to propose this toast. Here's to your health.
Dow lets you do great things.
My brother said, help me out for an hour. Now I've got a backache that could last all day. For this kind of pain, I don't take aspirin or Tylenol anymore. Today it's Advil. Advil is just what my aching back needs. See, Advil is different. Just one Advil is as effective as 2 regular strength Tylenol. That's important. And Advil is gentler to my stomach than aspirin. Whenever I hurt from some heavy lifting, the first thing I'm picking up is Advil. Advil, advanced medicine for pain.
Eye on America. In-depth daily reports on family, education, crime, the community, and the environment. Only on the CBS Evening News.
The number of Americans living below the poverty line has hit a 30-year high. That word today from a new census report. Among the reasons, stubborn unemployment and a decline in social services in the aftermath of the recession. Correspondent Bill Lagatuda has more about the face of poverty in America today.
Sarah is one of the 37 million poor Americans, today feeding her young daughter at a charity shelter.
If they didn't have missions, I wouldn't know what I'd do. I guess I'd be going out knocking on people's doors, asking for food or something.
Not since John Kennedy was president have there been so many poor in this country. Today's figures from the Census Bureau show a 2% increase in those living below the poverty line since the start of this decade. That's 5 million more Americans barely able to feed and clothe themselves.
Wages are continuing to fall, which means that more people become working poor.
African Americans and Hispanic Americans are about 3 times more likely to be poor than whites. The South is this country's poorest region, and 1 in 5 children in America lives in poverty. Statistically, the poverty line for a family of 4 is now about $14,000 a year. That hasn't changed much in the past few years. What has changed is the unofficial index of hopelessness. It seems to be way up.
The ones who are poor assume they will always be poor, and nothing will change that. And the people that are homeless no longer think that they'll ever have a house again.
All of which indicates that business at the shelters will be busy for a long time, that panhandlers will remain a fixture on American street corners. Given the economy lately, today's figures are depressing, but hardly surprising. Bill Lagatuda, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Not exactly a surprise either. Another veteran member of Congress is calling it quits and retiring. The distinguished Republican leader of the House, Bob Michael of Illinois, said, and I quote, "It's a good time to hang it up," and announced he will not seek a 20th term.
Former Los Angeles police officer Lawrence Powell today lost a U.S. Supreme Court bid to stay out of jail. Powell hoped to remain free while appealing his conviction for violating Rodney King's civil rights. No high court ruling yet on a similar appeal by Powell's convicted co-defendant, Stacey Kuhn. Extra tight security in New York today for opening arguments in the trial of 4 men accused of bombing the World Trade Center. The prosecution described the 4 accused of being on a war of terrorism. The defense pointed up the prosecutor's stunning admission that no one saw the defendants make the bomb or plant it.
Who makes the best Caesar dressing? Introducing Gourmet Caesar from Good Seasons. Real cheese is blended with classic spices for a fresh, authentic Caesar taste. New Gourmet Caesar.
From Good Seasons.
The doctor said to use hydrocortisone cream for my itch.
Try Preparation H hydrocortisone cream to effectively relieve problem itch.
It worked great, and I didn't need a prescription.
Preparation H hydrocortisone cream. Prescription strength without a prescription.
When you have hands that you're just so achy and painful from arthritis, you need a pain reliever cap that you can get off more easily.
That's why the makers of Tylenol introduced the Fast Cap package. It's so easy to open.
No pain, no nothing.
It's commended by the Arthritis Foundation.
Easy is 1, 2, 3. Less than 1, 2, 3. Easy 1.
The patented new Fast Cap only from Tylenol, the powerful pain reliever that's not a pain to open, not for homes with young children.
These are drugs. They come in many colors: electric blue, shocking pink, glow-in-the-dark orange, Kellogg's All Bran is not a drug. It comes in just one color, the natural color of wheat bran fiber. We admit it's not as flashy, but a lot of regular folks find All Bran, as part of a high-fiber diet, very tasteful. A high-fiber diet and Kellogg's All Bran for drug-free regularity. Look for the recipe on the box for delicious All Bran muffins.
After days of fighting in the streets of Moscow, what lies ahead for Boris Yeltsin?
We will have the latest developments.
Tomorrow on CBS This Morning with Harry Smith and Paula Zahn.
Updating our top story tonight, hardline opponents of President Boris Yeltsin have surrendered the Parliament building following a bloody assault by Yeltsin forces. The president's chief rivals are under arrest, and Yeltsin has banned a number of opposition groups. Most Western nations still back Yeltsin's handling of the crisis, but even his supporters are worried about the fallout from the fighting. Yeltsin repeatedly pledged not to use force to break the standoff, but in the end he did, after his opponents went on a rampage in the streets of Moscow. The hardliners lost this battle, but in the process they created martyrs for their cause and smudged Yeltsin's image as a Democrat and a man of peace. Now Yeltsin faces the task of getting democracy back on track, organizing elections amid the debris of a bloody revolt. The first question is, can Yeltsin survive? Can Russian democracy survive? All this takes place amid another great change underway in Russia, the weakening of the central government and the growing independence of regional powers. It's a free country now, but in the most dangerous sense. Without a working constitution or a national party system, local bosses are on their own, and some of them even talk of secession. The next big question is, will Russia break up? And now that Yeltsin has shown he's willing to use force, will he use it to try to control the rest of the country? For the United States, the Battle of Moscow was a wake-up call. President Clinton has backed Yeltsin on the assumption that he was leading Russia toward Western-style democracy. But now it seems the Russia that's evolving may be more like the one we've always known, undemocratic, isolated, and violent. What does that mean for us?
Well, joining us now for some answers, for analysis, are two of the world's most authoritative authors and scholars about Russia. In Moscow, CBS News correspondent Jonathan Sanders, and in New York, CBS News consultant, Princeton University professor Stephen Cohen. First, Jonathan Sanders, what can you tell us about Boris Yeltsin's health?
Dan, for centuries, people have speculated on the health of the men in the Kremlin. Yeltsin isn't that regular in his appearances. He doesn't always look that great. And if we can indulge in a cultural stereotype, Boris Yeltsin is a Russian man. Russian men like to drink. On the other hand, we know psychologically he's sticking very true to character. When challenged, Yeltsin steps back, thinks his position, and then pushes back hard. That's a healthy Yeltsin sign. Unfortunately, that healthy Yeltsin sign may not be too good for the body politic of Russia or for the body politic of an infant democratic spirit here.
Stephen Cohen, what about the question, can democracy and the democratic process now survive in Russia?
It's the fateful question, Dan. So much depends on where this country goes. Certainly, as we talk tonight, there is no democracy in Moscow. There has been none since September 21, when Mr. Yeltsin closed down not only the parliament, but the vice president elected, the constitutional court, the attorney general. Now we have violence in Moscow. The parliament building is burning. Mr. Yeltsin says there will be more democracy, there will be fair elections. It's hard to imagine that for two reasons. All the demons, all the despotic demons of Russian history are now loose in the land, 1,000 years of non-democratic government. Can this fragile experiment be revived? The image that sticks in my mind, and I think the image historians will focus on, is that burning parliament. Russia has always had strong leaders. It has never had an independent, stable parliament. And as we talk, parliament is burning.
Now, let's go back to Moscow. And the question, are we seeing the disintegration of Russia? And are the Russian republics now likely to break up? Jonathan?
Dan, I think we're seeing what we always see when the center grows weak. The periphery grows stronger, and the peripheries are different. Each part out there in the provinces has its own makeup, its own character. Some of them have very progressive leaders and very reactionary kinds of public assemblies. Others of them, it's the reverse, and many of them, I think we have to be honest enough to say, Dan, we simply don't know, or we can figure things wrong. Certainly a lot of power is draining out of Moscow, but that may not necessarily be a bad thing. It may give some people out there a chance to experiment with their own forms of democracy, develop their own forms of government. It does mean that the political structures that we're used to, that we're comfortable with, are going to be disappearing.
Thanks, Jonathan Sanders in Moscow and Stephen Cohen here in New York. Tomorrow night we'll try to talk about what the economic reforms may happen to them inside Russia and what's next. But right now, Connie, time for us to say adios.
And finally, one quick update on the other major story tonight. President Clinton has ordered hundreds of reinforcements into Somalia after the bloodiest fighting there yet. At least 12 U.S. servicemen killed, more than 70 wounded. Somalis dragged the body of one American soldier through the streets of Mogadishu, and a U.S. helicopter pilot is being held prisoner. Some in Congress now are calling on the president to pull U.S. forces out of Somalia, and there is some indication he is reconsidering U.S. policy in Somalia.
Stay with CBS News and this CBS station for the latest and analysis about Somalia and Moscow. Harry Smith and Paula Zahn will have all the overnight developments first thing tomorrow on CBS This Morning.
And Dan and I will see you right here again tomorrow night on the CBS Evening News. Thank you for joining us, and for all of us at CBS News, good night.
Good night.
I've been a stage and screen director for a long time, and Stella's been an actress for a long time.
For 30 years, we put money in Dreyfus mutual funds every month. Dreyfus is a leader in mutual funds.
In mutual funds, we're diversified over many, many stocks.
That's good.
Now, they say the play's a thing. Well, mutual funds aren't too bad either.
You're saying it all. Let's do this again. Wait a minute.
I have no time for colds. My husband's a doctor and can give me anything, but he recommends Dimetap Extentabs. Dimetap controls my sneezing and nasal congestion. It's strong medicine.
Doctors recommend Dimetap for their families and yours.
To help relieve her heartburn, Original Rolaids uses an aluminum salt. But his antacid is Tums, and Tums has calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Poor Newton. I know it's hard being here with so little to do all day, but Maytag builds them to last longer than any other brand. Look at them, icons of indestructibility. No wonder we Maytag repairmen are lords of loneliness, sultans of solitude. I know how you feel, that ache inside for the dinner. Hey, now there's something I can fix.
Maytag, the dependability people.
I always wanted to practice in a small town. I like to know the people I'm taking care of. It's important for me to be involved with the community. That's the way I want to live. I got a GM MasterCard because I wanted to do something special for my daughter's birthday. It was easy. I transferred my other credit card balances to my GM card and earned 5%. It was a thrill to give her the Beretta. It's a big part of her life. I don't think Christy will ever forget her 16th birthday.
The GM card with no annual fee. To apply, watch your mail for details.
Experience CBS News.
Battle for Moscow. Anti-Yeltsin forces surrender. Their leaders defeated. The parliament in flames. In the aftermath of the bloody fighting, can Yeltsin reunite the country and move his democratic reforms forward? Has his hand been strengthened or weakened by recent events? And what does all this mean for America? Complete details and analysis tomorrow on the CBS Evening News.
This is CBS.